Before we begin, I'd like to talk to you about something. This video is going to get super technical, but not technical in a way that only 10 of us can understand what we're talking about. This is going to be in a way where even our grandmas can understand what I'm talking about. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's what we're going with, okay? I worked on this video for a really long time. I ran a lot of tests. I ran them a couple of times to make sure the results are correct so that I can give you something more than just unboxing and spec reading, which is not in this video, by the way. We're not gonna have any unboxing or any beauty shots. We're gonna get down to the business. Down to the business. Let's go. Some people buy a product to talk about what it can do. Some people buy the product to talk about what they can do with it. That's why sometimes for some people, all Porsches may look the same, but for the others, when it comes to iPhone 14, Apple did something different. As you can see, we're lacking the mini. When it comes to 14, Apple didn't release an iPhone 14 mini, but they released an iPhone 14 Plus, which is the size of iPhone 14 Pro Max, and it is coming out in October. And the interesting thing is the difference between the Pro and the regular phones are getting bigger. For example, iPhone 14 and iPhone 14 Plus has A15 from iPhone 13. iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max has A16, which is a 4nm chip, which is good news and bad news. It's fine because A15 is already a super fast chip, and when it comes to performance, iPhone 14, and I'm guessing iPhone 14 Plus is gonna be the same way, performs really well. They perform just like iPhone 13 series. Here's the way I tested these. I use Adobe Rush and I exported 3 different files, 3 gigantic files. One of them is Imovie, one of them is MP4, and the other one is H.265. And the way we're gonna do this is actually a lot of fun. First of all, we're gonna make sure everything is charged to 100%, and not just like saying 100% on the screen. They're actually fully charged to 100%, and all the phones are cooled down to the room temperature or the regular temperature. And then we're gonna export the 9GB MP4 file. We're gonna convert it to 1080p, and we're gonna check the temperature again. And then we're gonna go to 7.2GB MOV file. We're gonna export that to 1080p. We're gonna check the temperature again, and then 2.7GB HEVC file to 1080p. And then we're gonna check the temperature again. And then we're gonna go back to the first file, the 9GB file, and we're gonna export that to 1080p again. And then we're gonna check the temperature, and we're gonna look at the battery percentage. This is gonna show us how much battery is drained after this process and how much the heat affected the performance, because we're gonna be able to see the difference between the first and the last export. And video exporting is such a demanding process that if a phone is doing good during video export, it's probably gonna do really good with the rest of the things you can use a phone for as well. By the way, I included iPhone 12 into this test because I realized when I released my iPhone 12 review, the timer I used in the video was 20% faster across all devices. So in that video, in itself, everything still stands. It's just the timing is wrong, but the differences between devices are the same. But while I was testing this and I remember the numbers from the past reviews, I was like, this is impossible. iPhone 13 and 14 are slower than iPhone 12. No, that's not the case. My timer was off, so I redid the test to be able to give you the actual real-time results. After this test, iPhone 14 seems to be doing as good as iPhone 13 Pro series. And as you can see on the last test, the performance does not get affected, and it finishes the tests with less heat and more battery. Less heat is always great news for sustained performance and the battery health in the long run. If you look at iPhone 12 results, you can see how much the heat affects the last export and how much the battery is drained. However, as a huge fan of iPhone mini, I cannot help but notice how iPhone 13 mini exported the same thing 1 second faster in the second round. And then I did the same test with Apple's own video editing app Imovie. However, during testing iPhone 14, when it was time to export the first file, the app said this video is already exported, and instead of exporting, just duplicated the existing file. And because I didn't have time to go and delete the files, which would mean iPhone 14 to cool down more, I just hit export in 4K, which took 3 times longer than exporting in lower resolution 1080p. Yet still iPhone 14 drained as much as iPhone 13, and it was almost 7 degrees cooler than iPhone 13. So I'm guessing maybe a 15 in iPhone 14 runs a little more comfortable compared to iPhone 13. By the way, I don't think any of these apps are properly optimized for these devices yet, so keep that in mind when it comes to results of these tests. And then I went to Adobe Lightroom and I exported 16 photos that are shot with Sony A1. These are gigantic raw files, and I exported them back to back. And the same thing, performance is up there. It exported in the same time as iPhone 13 and 13 Pro, but in the end, it stayed cooler. Now let's talk about camera. There's something different about the way iPhone 14 processes the photo, and Apple calls this the photonic engine. The entire way it puts the photo together is different now. Before, it was applying deep fusion after the photo was compressed, which means there was less information to deal with, because once the photo is compressed, for example, if it's a blue surface, the information there is very little. So when it's applying anything on top of it, you may not get the best result. But with this photonic engine, it moved the deep fusion. So before the photo gets compressed, the deep fusion applied there, which gives you better results. And you're gonna see, even though the cameras are the same, the results seem to be better. If you don't know the main difference between iPhone 14, or insert any iPhone number after 10, and the Pro series, is also the number of cameras besides the material and a couple of other stuff. Pro series, we usually have 3 cameras, and regular iPhone without the Pro name in it, we have 2 cameras, which is wide and then ultra wide. Ultra wide is the fisheye lens, you know, like the GoPro and the other action cameras we have. Okay, so I have a lot of photos that I took when it comes to comparing these phones, and some of them are in a very nice little lit environment, some of them are in a dimmer environment, and then some of them are in dark environment. And on top of that, I did some controlled shoots where I set everything up and I was able to control the lights and nothing was moving, so I was able to get proper results without, you know, when you take a photo, if the tree is moving or if your hand is shaking differently, the results may vary. But this way, all the results were very accurate and they're repeatable. You can test these yourself if you want as well. These are not very difficult. It's just, you just need a mount like this, and then you put one phone here, the other phone there, and then put this on tripod, set a timer, and then just tap on them and then just get the photos. Let's start seeing what's going on. Let's begin with ultra wide angle and compare it to iPhone 13's ultra wide angle. Let's put the new one on the right. I always like the new one on the right, 13 on the left. I can see that the skin tones are more vivid. It's almost like vibrance is turned on a little bit. Actually, I can go to edit and turn down vibrance myself. Yeah, now they're equal. So you can recover it if you want, but I see that on top of that, the photo is sharper. And when you look at these areas, it seems like there is less noise. So in that sense, when it comes to the ultra wide angle camera, iPhone 14 seems to be better than iPhone 13 in well lit situations. Now let's check out a lower light situation. Let's look at the info. Okay, 14 on the right. And then let's zoom in. Yes, immediately there's more contrast. And we're zoomed in quite a lot, by the way, 250% to see this. So maybe they can ease down the sharpening a little bit. Let's go and do it ourselves. This is just much better. The other sharpening was a little Samsung-like, if you will, between you and me. And I can see that there's more noise here and there's less noise on the other one. So in this controlled situation, we're zooming in quite a lot because I was a little further back with this. I feel like I see a little more detail on this drink over here, this focus chart on the right. Let's give the left one sharpening and let's see if it's the same thing. If it's because sharpening sometimes doesn't do exactly the same thing. Let's go back to comparison and zoom in. Yeah, see this inside of the focus chart? This one is better. iPhone 14 looks better on that one. This information is here on 14. That's 14, right? Yeah. And no information on 13. Yeah. iPhone 14, just like iPhone 13, iPhone 14 series does not have Apple RAW or ProRes. What that means is you cannot shoot the photos raw. They have to be compressed. And so all of these photos we're looking and comparing right now, they're compressed in high efficiency mode. Okay, now let's look at the wide angle camera. And as you can see here, let's zoom in. iPhone 14 is on the right. iPhone 13 is on the left. Again, the skin tone seems to be different. When we look at the shutter speed, we can see that iPhone 14, when you look here, was quicker because it has a wider aperture. So it's a faster lens, which means when you hold this camera in your hand, there's going to be less blur compared to iPhone 13. But honestly, right out of the camera, right now, I think I prefer iPhone 13. For iPhone 14, I'll probably go and bring down the contrast a little bit. And then let's see if we can save. Yeah, we can totally save the highlights. Yeah, the thing is, I feel like if with an update we can get like a little bit of sharpening reduction, it's gonna be a lot better. I see that the earring, which looks hilarious to me right now, is sharper. Also on the eyebrows, I realized it's a little sharper too. Clearly, iPhone 14's camera is sharper in this photo. But let's look at a controlled photo. Let's take a look at this and compare this to iPhone 14. Yeah, there you go. Now let's zoom in. You see these weird colors where it says added sugars? I don't see that on iPhone 14. Looks clearer to me. Of course, we're zoomed in like crazy once again, like almost 300%. But the color of this amp seems to be a little off. Let's switch to a darker image. And as I'm zooming in, I see that the positive grid writing on the 14 is sharper. Also, the hair on the microphone, which is my upcoming album. Also, the focus calibration chart writing seems to be sharper on iPhone 14. iPhone 14, 14 Pro, and 14 Pro Max, and 14 Plus has a different front-facing camera. And the biggest difference of this front-facing camera is that now it has focus, which means you can get closer to the camera. Before you weren't able to do that and get a photo in focus that looks better. And I have a couple of photos here to compare them, and let's go and start looking at them. This is iPhone 13 compared to iPhone 14 when it comes to the front-facing camera. As you can see, iPhone 13 on the left cannot focus, and because it has a fixed focus, so the object has to be from a certain distance away and then to infinity. With iPhone 14, 14 Plus, Pro, Pro Max, that's not the case. But just because it can focus, that doesn't mean it makes the background blurry. It is blurrier, as you can see, compared to the photo on the left, but don't expect too much blurriness when it comes to the front-facing camera. But it's a lot clearer, and because this is in focus, of course, it looks much better. And as you can see, f1.9, the aperture is bigger, the lens is faster. What faster means is it takes less time for it to capture the photo. So compared to iPhone 13, it took that photo in 1/320th of a second, and iPhone 14 took that in 1/470th of a second, which is faster, which once again means less shake, less blur in your photos when you're taking a photo. Also, ISO is lower. I didn't realize that. ISO is down to 25 on iPhone 14, and it is 32 on 13. Higher the ISO, more noise is gonna be in your image. This is a really good photo, but let's look at another one here. iPhone 14 on the right. And yeah, as you can see from this detail over here, 14 is clearly ahead. And now let's go to a lower light situation. And once again, 14 is on the right. I mean, it's very obvious to me that 14 is the clear winner when it comes to this. The eye is very, very obvious that it's sharper. Now let's talk about video. iPhone 14 can shoot videos up to 4K 60 frames per second just like iPhone 13. And of course, just like the photos, the video quality is better compared to iPhone 13 as well. On top of that, when it comes to stabilization, iPhone 14s have two new tricks. One of them is enhanced stabilization, which adds a little more stabilization on top of the regular one, and it supports videos up to 4K 60 frames per second. However, it crops into the picture a little bit. Then there's the active mode, which gives iPhone 14 series a video that looks like it's been shot on a gimbal. However, you can shoot up to a lower resolution, 2.8K 60 frames per second to be exact, because the crop to be able to get such stabilized footage is very big. This is 14 versus 13, and we have the active mode turned on the 14. As you can see, they're both at the ultra wide angle now, and this is the difference in crop. And when I switch to 1x, the crop is like this. So the thing is, right now I can walk around her like this. And create really good looking parallax videos, even with the ultra wide angle. So I can switch between lenses during active as well. So now we're gonna walk a little bit. And then we can start running. I'd like to take a moment and talk to you about what optical image stabilization is, what electronic stabilization is, and what do we mean when we talk about crop. Optical image stabilization is when you hold your phone in your hand and it's shaking a little bit. The sensor in the phone compensates for that shake. It just stays still, which is the optical image stabilization, and it gives you an actual physical stabilization in your phone. And on our phones, we have that system in wide angle and telelens, and we don't have it on the ultra wide angle fisheye lens because we don't need it. Because we have electronic image stabilization in our phones that works in all lenses, in all resolutions. And what that does is apply stabilization electronically, which I'm gonna show you how it does in a minute. But for it to be applied properly, we have to zoom into the picture, which you're gonna see in a minute, So now on iPhone 14, we have the regular electronic image stabilization turned on all the time. You cannot even turn it off, which is fantastic because you don't need to. And we're gonna see how that applies. And then we have enhanced stabilization. We're gonna see how that works and how much that crops in and why it crops in. And then how the active mode works. This applies to iPhone 14, 14 Pro, 14 Ultra, 14 Max, 14 Beta, 14 Gamma, and Ultra Plus Max, iPhone 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, too much information. Hang in there. It's very simple. This next part is going to be a lot of fun. Watch this. This is a footage I just shot outside. I'm walking with the camera in my hand, and as you can see, it is shaking a little bit. And then towards the end, I started shaking the camera on purpose. And yeah, so this is what's going on. If I want to stabilize this, I have to go, let's say this little crosshair right under my nose right now is where I want to keep my head, right? So every frame, I gotta pull the frame where that crosshair is, which means the frame of the image needs to move. And let me show you. See this red lines? Those red lines show you how much the camera is moving. And look what happened to the frame. The frame is coming in and out. Even here, right now the footage is stabilized, but you see the frame is moving. So what are you gonna do? You need to scale in. As you can see, the footage is actually, if we zoom out a little bit here, you can still see the frame. How much the frame is moving. So that's basically what we're talking about when we're talking about crop. We also have this app called Catalyst Browse. You can see on the corners here, we're seeing the corners of the image a little bit. But if I go and say I want only 8% crop, which gives you 92% image, which is what I usually like a lot. You can see on the image on the right that it is quite usable. We didn't lose much quality. And enhanced stabilization is 15% crop, which means we're getting 85% in. So that's gonna be the difference when we simulate it compared to the original footage. And as you can see, it's really smooth, right? And when we go to active mode is 40% crop, which means we're gonna have 60% of the image, which is this much. So when you go there, as you can see, it's incomparable what's happening between left and right. So that's what's happening on our phones when we switch to active mode or regular electronic image stabilization or enhanced stabilization. But because the footage is closer to us, we're losing quality. That's why the enhanced and the regular electronic stabilization is still in 4K because it's still can usable as 4K, but active when you zoom in like this. That's why Apple is giving you 2.8K. It's pretty understandable. What this also means is your phone needs to record the footage with a higher shutter speed. So while the camera is shaking, the footage shouldn't be blurry, because if it's blurry, even if you correct it, then it's gonna look blurry. This is where actually the gimbals come in handy, because the gimbal stabilizes the phone. The shutter speed doesn't matter. You can be in low light, you can be in bright sunlight. I hope that helped. This is a lot of fun for me to share these. Another feature that is better than iPhone 13 is the cinematic mode. Now in cinematic mode, you can record up to 4K 30 frames per second, and you can use the front camera, back camera, it doesn't matter. You can use all of the cameras. I found that with the front camera, iPhone 13, to my taste, performed a little better, but when it comes to rear cameras, they're both really good, and having that higher resolution is a lot of fun. Cinematic mode is not perfect, but it certainly is a lot of fun, and it makes a big difference when it comes to isolating yourself from the background. If you're creating content for, TikTok and stuff like that, you can use this feature and your footage is gonna look really good. It's a good feature. I don't think a lot of people realize that it is actually quite usable. Now, one interesting thing Apple did this year, courage, is to remove SIM tray for the phones that are released in US. As you can see, we don't have a SIM tray on our iPhone 14s. We have a bigger 5G antenna there, but that's all. And we were all worried what was going to happen when it's time to switch to eSIM. I am an AT&T customer, so I just tapped on one button and it transferred my physical SIM card into eSIM. And when it comes to transferring between these devices, it is really fast. It's actually faster than trying to find the pin and get the SIM card out and then move it over. But you can go and get a QR code from AT&T. I only know AT&T, so bear with me. So if you lose everything with that QR code, you can activate your eSIM. I don't have one yet, but keep that in mind. These devices have other features: SOS with satellite and crash detection. SOS with satellite basically works with a satellite if you're stranded somewhere, and then you can send a special message and it gets delivered. And if you're in an accident, because it has HDR gyroscope and dual core accelerometer, it understands that you stopped immediately and something happened, because the regular accelerometer and gyroscope cannot tell that big of an impact, but these ones can, which is why actually their stabilization is better compared to the previous iPhones as well. These are two really important features, and I hope you never need to use it. But whenever it's time to buy, for example, a watch or a phone for our family, for people that are older than me, I always like that. For example, the watch has the fall detection, so those kind of features. In the beginning, they may sound like, yeah, whatever, I don't go hiking, or my car drives itself, but it is nice to have it. Now, one thing I'm really excited about these devices, that all of them have Bluetooth 5.3, and Bluetooth 5.3 is just like Bluetooth 5.0, but Bluetooth 5.0 came out in 2016. This came out in May 2022. So it gives you power saving improvements, signal stability, and speed adaptation. I'm very excited about that, and I'm very excited to see what that is going to bring to the new AirPods Pro. iPhone 14 is interestingly lighter than iPhone 13. It is supposed to be more repairable. When it comes to display, it's 60 Hertz. If you're a person who really likes 120 Hertz, of course, this is gonna hurt your special eyes. Compared to iPhone 13, The camera bump is bigger, 14.9, 14.9, 14, 1 millimeter, and this is 1.1. It's not that big of a difference, but the bump on iPhone 14 is bigger. One interesting thing Apple did is, because the camera bumps are bigger on all of the phones, the wallet, where is it? Because the camera bump is more, this is the older one, 6.3 millimeters. Now this is 6.9 millimeters. So this wallet is thicker to compensate for the camera bump. The thinner your wallet gets after buying these devices, the thicker the wallet on it becomes. So should you switch to 14 if you have 13? Well, if you have 12, I can easily say, yeah, you should switch to 14 because it's a really nice upgrade. But if you're coming from 13 and if you don't use the camera features that much, if you're not a hungry creator on a budget, I don't think you should switch. Now, let's talk about iPhone 14 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max.
Everything's alright with the violet sky on my skin. Ooh, baby, I feel high with the violet sky on my skin. Let me breathe deep, let me get away. There's no place else I'd rather be. Ooh, everything's alright with the violet sky.
First, I like to begin with something really interesting. Look at this. What is this? It's a bag. Why we have a bag with MagSafe on it? Let me show you. By the way, the bag weighs 1.79 kilograms, which is 3.95 pounds. I'm glad you asked. It's very nice of you to ask. What is this? This is iPhone 13 Pro Max. Let's see if I can pick this bag up with my iPhone 13 Pro Max. Don't shake. And it's gone. Now let's look at iPhone 14. This is iPhone 14 Pro Max. This is iPhone 13 Pro Max. So the MagSafe of iPhone 14 Pro Max is stronger compared to iPhone 13 Pro and iPhone 13 Pro Max. Also, the placement of the MagSafe seems to be different when you look at it with that magnetic paper. You can see that as well. Let's begin with performance. Now that you know how I did these tests, I feel like we can finish this segment pretty fast. When it comes to Geekbench, as expected, iPhone 14 Pro's 4nm A16 chip performs better than A15. When we set all these devices to low power mode, we can see that iPhone 14 Pro and Max slows almost as much as 13 series, which means it will probably save more battery in this mode compared to iPhone 13. When we look at the graphic bench test, iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max is in the lead as expected. What happens when we switch to photo and video export business? Let's start with Adobe Rush. 1, 2, 3. iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max was head-to-head with iPhone 13 series. However, iPhone 14 Pro finished faster than 13 Pro in couple of exports, and 14 series drained less battery. And even though the starting temperatures of 14 series were higher, iPhone 14 Pro Max was cooler than iPhone 13 Pro Max in the end. I have to test this again once these apps get updated. When it comes to iMovie, iPhone 14 Pro was faster than iPhone 13 Pro, but iPhone 14 Pro Max and 13 Pro Max were head-to-head. As you know, on the last test, I had to export in 4K instead of 1080p on these 14 series, and that's why they finished in such long time. But in the end, iPhone 14 Pro drained less battery and the phones were cooler compared to iPhone 13 series. When it comes to Lightroom, this is where iPhone 14 Pro series said, let me show you what I can do, and they finished the job much quicker and they stayed cooler too. These devices have 120 Hz LTPO screen and they're super smooth. It's almost like you're pushing a piece of paper to left and right. Also, when it comes to the brightness, these screens are a lot brighter compared to iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max. And yes, you guessed it, I tested these with my digital light meter, and the results, which are in lux, shows that iPhone 14 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max clearly has brighter screens, and iPhone 14 Pro Max has the brightest screen. And outside, it really looks like this is how it's supposed to look. It really looks like you're looking at a piece of paper. It feels like you're looking at this. It is really good. But after a lot of filming and while I was testing these devices in the weather of Los Angeles, the screen dimmed on one of these devices. I don't know if you guys can see this, but iPhone 14 Pro dimmed its screen. iPhone 14 Pro Max is still fine. It didn't dim its screen. It just dimmed its screen, by the way.
It's hard to tell because it dimmed the screen, so the reflection is really high on it.
Yeah, so when it heats up like that, it dims the screen still, of course. Science. As you can see, and as we were talking about this quite a lot online, these devices also have always on screen in the Apple way. What that means is the screen is always on. It almost feels like, you know, you forgot to turn your phone off. The display settings is set to turn off never or something like that. In the beginning, it feels really weird because it is not that different from the screen when it's turned on. I did a test, a 24-hour test to see how much battery this thing drains. I put two iPhone 14 Pro Maxes next to each other. One with always on display on, one with off, and just for funsies, I threw an iPhone 13 Pro Max next to it to see what's gonna happen. And after 24 hours, 13 Pro Max had 85%, 14 Pro Max had 88%, and the one with always on display turned on had 71% battery remaining. These are, by the way, 14 Pro Maxes are restored from same backup, so they're exactly the same. They're brand new phones, which tells us that in the worst case scenario, which I'm going to explain in a minute, it drains 0.7% battery every hour. The always on screen works with auto brightness too. So under studio lights, they turn on, and when it's dimmer, they dim down. And when you put them into your pocket, they turn off completely. And in a dim situation, like in the nighttime or, you know, by your bedside, after 50 minutes, always on screen turns off by itself. So my scenario that draining 18%, 17%, draining 17% more in 24 hours is very unlikely because first of all, you know, use the phone regularly. And on top of that, you may be putting it in your pocket every once in a while. You may be in a dark situation. You may be in a dimmer situation compared to studio lights, so the brightness don't need to go up this much. So I feel like technically always on display shouldn't be a problem. Now let's talk about Dynamic Island. Dynamic Island is the new notch that claimed its independence. Now it's living by itself down here, as you can see. And I mean, as soon as I saw it in the Apple's presentation. I loved it. I think it's fantastic that Apple embraces the independent notch, which we call dynamic island, and added interactions with it. So if you go countdown for 20 minutes, first of all, as you can see, that was Siri. It immediately puts it up there and then you can push it. It's basically like a little mini app version of what's going on. And also you can see what's happening constantly. As you can see, now we have two apps, and when you hold it down, you control one. When you hold down the other one, you control that one. It's very cute and very useful, and I like it a lot. However, I don't see the notch on a phone. After a while, you stop seeing a notch, just like how you don't see the rear view mirror in your car or your nose, right? It disappears with MacBook Pro as well. I just don't see it anymore. But with this, it's right here. You see it all the time. Even though you use it or don't use it, it's right there. And when you're screen recording, that thing is recorded in the screen recording too, which is a nice way if you want to show what's happening with Dynamic Island. But even if Dynamic Island isn't included in what's going on, it still gets recorded. First of all, let's make this clear. I'm not saying I don't like Dynamic Island, but compared to Notch, Dynamic Island to me looks a little like this. So I wish there was a dynamic peninsula where this is connected to the top and it's the same size, so the animations were happening around it. And when you tap on it, it wobbles. It's really nicely done. So now it's time for someone to bring sheep.exe and have that little sheep walk left and right up there, maybe, if possible. All right, hold on tight. Now we're going to talk about the cameras. And when it comes to cameras, iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max really stands out because for the first time in an iPhone, we have the 48 megapixel camera. iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max has 3 cameras at the back. A telecamera when you want to capture something in the distance or get a good portrait photo, a 48 megapixel wide-angle lens for almost everything, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide-angle lens which has macro capabilities, which means you can get action camera-like shots or you can get really close to the things that you want to get photos of. Okay, now I like to talk about megapixels because when it comes to megapixels, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what they are, what they do, why is higher number usually doesn't mean anything to most of us, but why is it used for a marketing term? In order to really understand what's happening with iPhone 14's 48 megapixel sensor camera, first we have to clear how these megapixels work, what the sensors do and stuff like that. This is a Netflix approved cinema camera and this thing is 10,000 megapixels. 10,000. I'm just kidding. This is 12 megapixels and look at the size of that sensor. See that? That's a full frame sensor. And that thing is only 12 megapixels. I'd like you to remember that. Only 12 megapixels. All right. Now let's draw ourselves a sensor. By itself, a sensor cannot sense color. It can only sense the luma, the light value. That's why long time ago, someone put a color filter array on top of it. What that means is every photo site, first of all, we're not even talking about megapixels yet. These are photo sites on the sensor that captures light. Since it has the filter on it, it is capturing light regarding to that color. So this one says, oh, there's this much green, this luma value, light value of green. This one says there's this much red, and then this much green, and then this much blue. And then there's this remosaic algorithm that these devices do and put all that information together and then just kind of guesses and then creates a pixel. This is how it is happening in our cameras. And smaller the sensor is, it gathers less light. You can imagine this. Usually photographers refer to this as a bucket. So the bigger the bucket, every bucket here, the more light it's gonna capture. That's why this gigantic sensor, which compared to iPhone sensor, it is like this big, is only 12 megapixels. All right. With this camera, I can almost shoot in complete darkness and get a usable footage. That's why it is what it is. And for 4K video, you only need 8.5 megapixels. So 12 megapixels is more than enough to get 4K footage. But the reason there's a difference between these two is because of the sensor size. But where this gets the advantage, I know I'm like branching a little bit into the conversation, is that iPhones have computational photography and it can use other lenses to get a little bit of help, which I'm gonna show you in a minute. So normally this is how a sensor looks like. But iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max's 48 megapixel sensor looks like this. What does that mean? What happens is each of these photo sites is actually divided into 4 as well. So now what happens is this sensor becomes 48 megapixels. That's why there's this ratio between 12 and 48 megapixel camera, because now we have 4 greens, 4 reds, 4 greens, 4 blues for each photo site. And what this can do is this guy can say, hey, I'm going to take care of the brighter green areas. And this guy can say, hey, I'm going to take care of the darker green areas. And then when you gather all this information, you have a photo that can see the shadows and the highlights without clipping, giving you a better looking 12 megapixel image, because all these greens, even though they're getting less light, they can have more information compared to a one photo site, because it can divide itself into 4. Now, this usually kind of means, imagine a pizza that is divided into 12 slices and then just slice that into 48. In order to get same amount of food, you still have to, if you're usually eating 2 slices, now you have to eat 8 slices. So when it comes to marketing, I can say, hey, come shop from Farouk's pizza place. Our pizzas are 48 slices, right? That's actually mostly how this thing goes. But it is still not fully that, because now the 48 megapixel quad Bayer sensor in a smartphone gives you more flexibility when it's combined with its capabilities. And in iPhone, this just works great. So if you put all these 4 sensors, photo sites together, the pixel size goes up to, what is it? 2.44 micrometer pixels, which is really big compared to the previous 1.9 micrometer pixel size. So it gathers more light in 12 megapixel mode. When you want to shoot in 48 megapixel mode, what happens is this. Each photo site acts as an individual, right, to give you 48 megapixel photo. But what happens is between the blue and the green, there's a gap. There's another blue there. And then between this green and then this blue, there's a gap. So the photo, when remosaicing is creating the photo, the quality of the image usually crumbles. It doesn't give you a nice looking photo, especially if you consider the quality of the lenses, the size of the lens and everything we have here and the size of the sensor, everything kind of gets worse. But for some reason, these guys did it. And the 48 megapixel takes amazing photos. In 12 megapixel mode, takes fantastic photos. And in 48 megapixel mode, it still takes amazing photos. I am mind blown. Let me show you what I mean. This is Samsung Note 20 Ultra 5G. It came out in 2020 and it has 108 megapixel camera. Just to show you how the megapixel count can turn into that pizza example I gave you, let's take a photo and compare them. Because when you market a device saying it has 108 megapixel, it may sound like it is twice better than 48 and infinitely better than 12 megapixels. But is it though? When we open up the files next to each other in Lightroom, as you can see that 12,000 to 9,000 photo that came out of Note 20 Ultra 5G can't keep up with the 48 megapixel photo coming out of iPhone 14 Pro or iPhone 14 Pro Max. Okay, so look at this. I'm just pointing this here, and with my fingers, I'm just gonna block these two cameras. And as you can see, the lens, the image on the screen is derping a little bit because iPhone is using all of the lenses all of the time to gather as much information it can to give you a great looking photo or video. One thing about the iPhone cameras that has been bugging a lot of people is the reflection that happens in the lens when you're outside in the nighttime and you're pointing it towards light. There's this reflection like lens flare or ghosting that is happening on the iPhones. And when it comes to iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max, actually to 14 as well, that thing still exists. And I think it's a little more spread now. That's kind of what I've been seeing. But in order to stop that, because that is the light coming back into the camera and then it's bouncing from one lens to the other, I don't know what sacrifice we need to do to stop that. So maybe that is why Apple is not doing anything about it. But I think in the end, compared to iPhone 13 Pro, because it is less defined, maybe it is a little better. iPhone 14 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max can shoot raw photos, which means you get uncompressed full image that you can edit afterwards, and that makes a huge difference when it comes to editing these photos. Okay, let me show you the difference between the compressed and uncompressed raw photo and what it means for people like us. As you can see, this is the compressed photo, HEIC, and it takes 1.18 megabytes. And this is the 12 megapixel uncompressed photo. It takes 22 megabytes. And if we go 48 megapixels, it is 53 megabytes, and I think it even gets higher than that depending on the information in the photo. As you can see, we can see the sky nicely, but when we go to the raw photo, the sky seems to be blown out. So if I'm just trying to capture a photo quickly and if I just am going to post it and then move along, this is great. But if I want to do a little bit of work on it, this is actually not good for me. Let me show you. If we go to edit and give -3 to exposure, as you can see here, the clouds, they're not okay. But if I go here and put -3, as you can see, the clouds are really nice. Even if I go back to the compressed photo and set it to 0, it is not looking good. And we have all kinds of information like that in the highlights and everywhere in an uncompressed photo, which means when I start editing this photo, I'm gonna end up with something that is gonna look much better than this. It can also shoot ProRes video, which is very little compression over video. But since we still have the Lightning port, I was expecting at least Lightning version 2 or something like that. But I guess we're going towards wireless more and more. Getting big files out of the iPhone is not easy. So if you're going to shoot in ProRes, keep that in mind. iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max has a brand new ultra wide angle camera, which has a bigger sensor, bigger pixel size, which we talked about. So the sensor is bigger, it gathers more light. But when it comes to aperture, it is f2.2 versus f1.8 that we had on iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max. Okay, now let's compare iPhone 14 Pro's ultra-wide-angle lens to iPhone 13 Pro. In compressed mode, first of all, as you can see, the photos look amazing already. But if you want to crop in and then get more stuff out of the photos, it's just iPhone 14 has amazing image quality. And then let's switch to DNG. And here, first of all, I don't know, this is probably because the Lightroom needs to be updated because it looks a little weird. Let's say auto and give it a little brightness and compare them. As you can see from the eye, from the nose and everything, iPhone 14 looks so much better. So in a lower light situation, the same thing. iPhone 14 has more detail, especially if you look at the eyes and the lips in compressed mode. And when we compare the photos in RAW mode, it looks better than iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max's ultra wide angle camera. Now let's take a look at a controlled photo. 13 on the left, 14 on the right as usual. And as we zoom in to 250%, as you can see, iPhone 13 has more noise and less detail, as you can see from the scan over here. iPhone 14 Pro has a lot more information. Lower light situation, as you can see, the difference becomes a lot more clearer between iPhone 13 and 14. And I thought iPhone 13 was having an issue. As you can see, I'm switching between the photos. I took 4 different photos with iPhone 13 in RAW mode, in regular mode. I thought maybe it wasn't able to focus properly. But even if that's the case, compared to 14 in even lower light situation with the ultra wide angle lens, it falls behind. All right, now we're looking at the wide angle. This is iPhone 14 on the right, iPhone 13 on the left. If we go zoom in, as you can see that there's a very big difference. If you look at the eyelashes, that you can see the sharpness, face, the eyebrows and everything, it just looks more natural. By the way, we're zoomed in to 100%, right? Let's go back up to 100%. Now we're gonna switch to DNG, and here the difference is, I don't even know what to say. So that's the 48 megapixel version, I think. No. Oh no, we're not even there yet. This is the this is the 48 megapixel version. And it is just mind-blowing. It's knowing all these cameras, knowing what they can do. This is ridiculous for me. And when we switch to the controlled environment and zoom in, like there's a weird color over here, even though this is DNG, right? Yeah, iPhone 13 DNG. We don't have that problem over here with 14 Pro, and 14 Pro looks a little more pleasing to my eye in this comparison. And this is the 12 megapixel RAW, and if we switch to the other one, we need, first of all, we need to turn off the parallel. Then, of course, things get even more crazier. Why are we comparing these still? I think you get the point. Look at that. Look at that difference. iPhone 14 is so clean. Oof. Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's good. This is iPhone 14 on the right again, and this is the 12 megapixel RAW file, and as you can see, it's sharper. We have a little more noise, it seems, compared to iPhone 13, but look at this. I can see the numbers over here a lot clearer than this one over there. And for 2x photo, this camera can just take the middle of the sensor and switch to 48 megapixel mode. Remember the sensor thing we did a couple of minutes ago? And just take that and give you a 12 megapixel sort of optically zoomed, technically optically zoomed photo. And if you're wondering what that looks like, that is gonna surprise you as well. 13 Pro Max, 14 Pro Max, 2x zoom, 14 Pro on the right side. This is just mind-blowing to me. Look at this image on the right. It's as if like it came out of Hasselblad or something. It's so clear. Nothing looks artificial. I just love it. And of course, this goes for the lower light and stuff like that as well. But of course, in the lower light, especially when you're doing the nighttime photography and stuff like that, when you're using the 2x, it takes a lot longer for the camera to capture the footage. So the max is went to 20 seconds in 2x on this one, on iPhone 14. This is where that bucket example can come in handy, because we're using the center of 48 megapixel sensor. The buckets needs to be filled up a lot more to be able to get same amount of water. The other one finished in 5 seconds, but because the pixel size is so small now, this needs 20 seconds in 2x to get the shot. We got the shot, now it's processing. It's relatively cleaner. We see some stars. We don't see any stars on this one. We see some stars on this one. Okay. By the way, if you compare iPhone 14 wide angle in 1x to 2x, 2x is slightly better if you're shooting in compressed or 12 megapixel mode with the 1x mode. So if I zoom in 200% to a photo that I shot with compressed or 12 megapixel mode with 1x, the 2x looks better. But if you're shooting in 48 megapixel mode with the wide angle lens, then I say just crop it because it looks better than 2x in RAW mode. Also, even in bright light, the 2x mode requires more light, which means you need to hold it steadier to get a sharper image. But compared to an iPhone that doesn't have the 48 megapixel sensor, as you can see here, it's clearly, it's not a gimmick, and it delivers. So 2x is real. And now let's look at the telelens. As you can see, there's not much difference in the telelens in bright light, but I feel like the skin colors are better in every situation. Also, the telelens is same as iPhone 14 and iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max. But let's go to a lower light situation. Maybe we can see if it makes a difference when it comes to the photonic engine of photons. As you can see, they're very similar. But when we switch to RAW, let me just hit auto on this one and then go back to comparison. The skin looks more natural. And it seems like iPhone 14 Pro has a little more detail. There's more detail. Let's go. That's what I just said. I just said that. Okay. And of course, just like iPhone 14, when it comes to front-facing camera, iPhone 14 Pro is ahead of iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max as expected. Now, we have a new flashlight on these devices, and I compared those as well. And it seems like it does a better job compared to iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max. It seems like the camera reacts a little better to what's going on, and in the end the photo looks a little better compared to iPhone 13. And of course, now that we established the photo quality is so much better, the video quality is really good as well.
After all that we've been through, I always knew I'd be the one to
features we've covered during iPhone 14 review also applies to iPhone 14 Pro series, including 4K 30 frames per second in cinematic mode, enhanced stabilization option, and action mode, which all works great, and the difference compared to iPhone 13 Pro series is very obvious. However, having that telelens on the Pro series opens a brand new door when it comes to filming. For starters, in cinematic mode, you can switch to 3x, and you can also turn on enhanced stabilization and get really nice looking parallax effect. But the most fun for me was to run with telelens while active mode is on. Running with a narrow angle lens camera is extremely challenging to stabilize, and I think iPhone did an amazing job in active mode, especially if you compare it to iPhone 13 on the left. Okay, so this one, iPhone 14 Pro, is in active mode with the telelens, and right now we're shooting with the telelens, and iPhone Pro Max is on the telelens either, but the active is not on, and iPhone 13 Pro is just to show you what I'm doing. And now I'm just gonna try to create this parallax. Actually, maybe I should zoom in to match the shot with iPhone 14 Pro Max. All right, this is all handheld. Am I in the shot? And now I'm gonna go. This is another very challenging shot, and the reason is while you're zoomed in on the subject's face, because the background is so far away, any shake will be much more obvious in the shot. But as you can see, the action mode takes really good care of it. Actually, you know what? For a shot like this, my test shows enhanced stabilization is actually quite enough as well. And also with enhanced stabilization, you end up with a 4K image. This is probably why the other one is called action and this one is enhanced. Anyway, if you apply a little bit more stabilization in the post for this shot, you will get a really smooth parallax effect. In the end, iPhone 14 Pro series cameras are the best iPhone cameras I've ever used. I think I'll be able to capture incredible looking footage with these devices this year, and that makes me really happy. Oh, also I realized another difference between iPhone 13 and 14 series, and that is the speaker quality. Before we begin, I'd like to summarize what's happening. iPhone 13 Pro is gonna sound very muffled, and I think that is because I used iPhone 13 Pro all year long. So it was in my pocket, it was left and right. It may be clogged a little bit, even though I tried to clean it before this test. And you may not be able to hear it, but in real life, iPhone 14 Pro Max, iPhone 14 Pro, and iPhone 14 sounds fuller compared to iPhone 13 Pro, Pro Max, and 13.
I'm slow to start up, but I'm in from day one. I don't know a lot, but I know about us. I don't know a lot, but I know I love you like we're gonna die young. One time I took the R train out to Bay Ridge for some kid, 'cause I thought we might kiss and we did. And I hope he hears this and regrets the day he let me go. We were barely 17, he wanted me just like the movies, but I want the real thing, I don't want to fake it anymore. I can't get this out of my system. I can't get this out of my system. Baby, I'm just wired different. Slow to start up, but I'm in from day one. I don't know a lot, but I know about us. I don't know a lot, but I know I love you. We're gonna die young. I'm slow to
Well,
dive in.
I guess that wraps up this video for me. This has been really hard work, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned about these devices, and I hope it helped you to get the device that will work best for you. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in the comment section below if you enjoyed this more conversational style video. If you enjoyed this more, hey, let's look at this together kind of video instead of just voiceovering everything. And let me know what you think about iPhone 14. Do you like them? What do you think about these camera upgrades? What do you think about always on screen? What do you think about dynamic island? Yeah, cannot wait. I cannot wait to switch to this. All right. Thank you very much for watching. And subs if you loved it, dubs if you loved it. And then I'll see you on the next one. All right. Bye. Bye. See you later. See ya.